I used to think I was going to be a big city cop. That was the plan I carried around, like it was a promise. When I was a kid, I watched crime shows and told myself I'd end up somewhere with streetlights and sirens, somewhere that never really slept. I wanted the kind of job where you felt useful every night, where you could point to a case and say, that mattered, that helped somebody. Instead, I got flat land and big sky. I got gravel roads, cornfields, and wind that never seems to stop. I got a department so small that everybody knows everybody, and the people who don't know you yet will by the end of the week. I'm not going to name the town or the county. I'm not doing that to be dramatic. I'm doing it because I still have a badge, and because I already know how this looks on paper. If you write the wrong thing in the wrong place, somebody higher up decides you become a problem. Most nights out here are quiet. You answer noise complaints and do welfare checks. You break up a bonfire party once in a while. You write tickets to people who drive too fast on dirt roads. It isn't glamorous, but it's work, and most of the time it's predictable. I rode with a senior officer most shifts, a guy I'll call Ray. He'd been doing this forever. He was steady, no drama, and he knew the area like it was his own backyard. The evening it started, we were doing the same loop we always did, the edge of our jurisdiction where the houses thin out and the land turns into nothing but fields. The sun was going down, that orange light that makes even a beat-up barn look good. Ray was telling me one of his old stories. Some call from years back that turned into a run-in with a wild animal and a guy who'd gotten himself hurt hiking. Ray told it like he was talking about a flat tire, just facts and a shrug. We came around a bend where the road dips and the corn rises high on both sides like walls. That's when we saw the truck. It was a farm pickup, light-colored under all the mud, the kind of truck you expect to see in a field and not much else. The wheel wells were packed with dried dirt. The sides were streaked with clay. The tailgate had scratches and dents that looked like years of hauling tools and feed and whatever else. It was parked wrong, angled half into the ditch, front end slightly down. Not wrecked, just sloppy, like the driver pulled over in a hurry and didn't care how it looked. The lights were off. No hazards, no running lights. And the driver's door was open, not wide, but open enough that it looked like somebody stepped out and never bothered to shut it. That was the part that made my stomach tighten. Out here, you don't leave a door open unless you want something in your cab, or you got out so fast you forgot everything else. Ray slowed and stared. He didn't say anything at first. He just looked at it the way you look at a bad sign. Then he pulled our cruiser onto the opposite shoulder and killed the engine. For a moment we just listened, wind in the corn, the tick of hot metal cooling under the hood. Nothing else. Ray said, "That ain't right." We got out. I felt that shift in my body, the one that happens when you're done riding and talking and you're back in work mode. Ray took the lead like always, not rushing, not casual, just controlled. I stayed a step behind and watched the corn and the open door. Ray called out as we approached, "Hey, you all right in there?" No response. Our headlights lit the back of the truck. In the bed there was a tarp, dark and dirty, pulled over something bulky. Ratchet straps and bungee cords held it down, but one bungee hung loose like it had been yanked. A strap lay slack across the tarp instead of tight. In the headlight glare, I saw a clean edge of metal under the tarp, too clean compared to the mud on everything else. Ray moved toward the bed. I covered the cab and the corn. I kept my hand near my holster without thinking about it. I didn't see anyone, but the feeling that something was off kept climbing. Ray lifted his flashlight and aimed it into the gap where the tarp had shifted. He didn't touch anything at first. He just looked. His whole posture changed. His shoulders tensed and he took a step back fast. His hand went to his gun. Back, he said. Back now. He drew his revolver. I drew my pistol and moved with him, both of us backing away from the truck. Call it in, Ray said. Tell dispatch to send everyone, EMS 2, now. I keyed my radio and forced my voice to stay level. Dispatch, we've got a suspicious vehicle stopped on the county road out by the fields. Possible explosive device. Request multiple units and EMS staged. Dispatch came back with questions. Ray leaned toward me, his eyes still scanning the corn in the truck. Tell them it's real, he said. Tell them bomb squad. So I did. While I was talking, I got a better glimpse into the bed. Under the shifted tarp were small cylinders taped together like somebody built a cluster of short pipes. Wires ran between them. A small propane tank sat braced against the bundle, and on top, half visible, was a handheld radio wired right into the mess. It didn't look professional. It looked like somebody with enough time and enough anger put it together in a garage. Ray's flashlight snapped forward toward the open driver's door. A figure stepped into view near the cab, just far enough out of the corn that we could see him. Hoodie, jeans, mud on his boots. He held something in his right hand. Ray's voice changed, not softer, just different. Cole? Cole, is that you? The kid lifted his head. His face was pale, eyes wide and flat like he hadn't slept in days. I recognized him then, local guy in his early 20s, some minor trouble over the years, but nothing that put him on our radar as dangerous. He looked at Ray and swallowed. I have to, he said. Ray held his gun steady and lifted his free hand slightly, palm out. Put it down, he said. Just put it down. We can talk. Cole's hand trembled. It opens tonight, he said. I didn't know what he meant. I kept my sights on his hands. The thing he held looked like another walkie-talkie. Ray said, What opens? Cole's eyes flicked past us toward the field. The hatch, he said. If it opens, it's too late. He lifted the walkie-talkie like he was about to press the transmit button. Ray didn't hesitate. One shot. The sound hit the air like a hammer. Cole jerked and dropped the radio, then fell to his knees, clutching his shoulder. Blood soaked through his hoodie fast. I moved in to secure him. Ray shouted, Don't touch that radio! Don't touch anything in the truck! Cole was gasping and shaking. You don't understand, he kept saying. I was trying to help. I cuffed him and pulled him away from the truck, sitting him on the gravel. I pressed gauze to his shoulder until EMS arrived. His skin was clammy. His eyes kept drifting to the field like he expected something to come out of it. Backup rolled in quick after that. 2 more units, then our supervisor. One look at the bed of the truck and the supervisor ordered everybody back. We set a wider perimeter. The wind kept moving the corn like waves, and every time it shifted, I thought I saw someone standing in it. Bomb squad came in from a larger agency hours later and pushed us back. They worked slow and careful, the way you do when you don't get a second chance. Near dawn, they told us what they found. Cole had packed explosive powder into nearly 24 small cylinders, braced them against 2 portable propane tanks, and wired the whole thing to a remote trigger. The walkie-talkie wasn't for talking. It was a switch. If he'd pressed it, the device might have gone right then. Cole got transported to the hospital. Ray's revolver round did serious damage. A bullet like that doesn't just punch a clean hole. It tears, it breaks, it makes surgeons work. Once the truck was cleared and towed, I finally saw something I missed in the dark. Tire tracks leading off the road and into the field. 2 clean lines cut through the edge rows of corn like Cole had driven in and backed out. Fresh enough that the dirt still looked loose. That detail stayed in my head all day. Cole was unconscious for almost 2 days. Between the injury and the meds, the hospital kept him quiet and kept us out. When we finally got in to talk to him, his dad was there, sitting stiff in a chair, eyes red like he hadn't slept. His dad had weight in town, Not political exactly, but close enough. Land, business, a name people respected. His dad tried to shut the interview down. Then Cole woke enough to speak and insisted we come in. The first thing Cole asked was, "Where's my truck?" Ray answered without emotion. "Impounded. Bomb squad took the device." Cole's eyes widened and his breathing sped up. He tried to sit up and immediately winced, collapsing back. "You didn't," he whispered. Ray leaned in. "Tell us what you were doing, because that looked like you were about to blow yourself up." Cole shook his head, sweat beading on his forehead. "It wasn't for people," he said. "It wasn't for you. It was for the hatch." Ray gave me a look like he'd had enough. Cole kept going anyway, like he couldn't stop. He said the hatch wasn't supposed to be there. He said he found it by accident. He said he tried to weld it shut and bury it and pretend it wasn't real. He said it opened anyway. Ray asked him what he meant, and Cole said it opened on a cycle, every 3 nights, always around 3 in the morning. He said when it moved, the air changed. Radios acted wrong. Phones acted wrong. He said it used voices. Cole's dad told him to stop. Cole ignored him. His eyes were wet and his hands shook. "It calls you," he said. "It calls you with voices you trust." Ray shook his head like he was trying to knock the thought loose. "You're telling me you built a bomb for a door in a field." "It isn't a door," Cole said. "It's a mouth." Ray asked, "What comes out?" Cole swallowed hard. "Not bodies," he said. "Not at first. It gets in your head." Ray cut the interview short. He thought Cole was delirious. Maybe he was. Maybe he wasn't. I walked out of that hospital room with 2 things in my head. One was the device in that truck bed, the time and effort it took to build, and the fact that Cole brought it out there anyway. The other was the tire tracks into the field. That night I couldn't sleep. I tried. I stared at the ceiling and listened to the wind outside and my own thoughts. I kept seeing the open door of the truck, like the town itself had left something unlatched. Around midnight, I got up and made coffee and told myself I was just going to do due diligence, just going to find where Cole had gone into the field. If nothing else, it was evidence. Ray refused to go. "It's corn," he told me. "There's nothing out there but dirt and weeds." So I called 2 other officers to meet me, one younger guy who didn't mind overtime, and one older guy who was skeptical but reliable. I'll call them Miller and Klein. We met near the shoulder where we'd found the truck. The sky was clear. No storm, no fog, just stars. The air was cold in that way it gets before dawn, even in warmer months. We parked with our headlights aimed toward the field and walked in along the tire tracks. It didn't take long to find where the tracks ended. They ran straight between the rows for maybe 50 yards and stopped like the truck had been parked there briefly. Boot prints marked the soil, scuffed and repeated like pacing. Then my flashlight beam hit metal. A circle of steel sat flush in the dirt, large enough that you couldn't mistake it for farm trash. It looked like a lid. There was a raised ring around it and bolt holes like something had once been anchored down. In the center were curved scuff marks, clean arcs like something had rotated again and again. There was a seam, thin but clear, that ran around the circle. Standing near it made my skin tighten. The air felt charged, not a shock, more like the warning feeling before lightning, except the sky above us was empty. Miller rubbed his forearm. "You feel that?" Klein tried to laugh it off. Static, probably a fence line. But his voice didn't sound sure. We leaned in with our lights, no handle, no latch, just metal and seam. I checked my phone without thinking. 2:58 a.m. I almost said something about it like it mattered. It did. Because the moment the clock flipped to 3 a.m., the air changed. The first crackle came over Miller's radio. Not dispatch, not our channel. Just a burst of static like someone had keyed up on the wrong frequency. Then a voice, faint and close, said, "Miller." Miller froze. The voice sounded like his wife. I knew his wife's voice. I'd met her at a community event. It was her tone, her cadence, everything. Miller lifted his radio like that would make it make sense. "Dispatch?" he said. Klein shook his head fast. "That's not dispatch." My own radio crackled next. A voice said my name in a soft, half-asleep way that made my stomach drop. It sounded like my girlfriend. I gripped my radio so hard my hand hurt. I looked around like I'd find a prankster in the corn. There was nothing. Just rows and darkness and the metal circle under our feet. The pressure in the air increased. My ears started to ring, low and steady like a distant engine. Miller took a step toward the hatch without thinking, like his body decided before his brain did. I grabbed his vest and yanked him back. He blinked at me, confused, like he'd been waking up. Klein said, "We need to go." I wanted to agree. Then my vision did something I still don't like thinking about. It skipped, not blurred, not dimmed, skipped like a camera dropping frames. One moment I was standing a few feet away. The next moment, my boots were right on the seam, toes almost touching the edge of the circle, and I couldn't remember taking a step. Klein was behind me, breathing hard. Miller was to my left, swaying like he was dizzy. The radios crackled again, layered voices now, overlapping like a crowd murmuring. Not words, just the shape of voices. The kind of sound that makes you feel watched. Then the hatch groaned, metal on metal, low and slow, like something shifting under pressure. A faint blue glow leaked along the seam, not bright like a flashlight, more like cold fire under a lid. Miller made a small noise and then started laughing. It wasn't joy. It wasn't even amusement. It sounded like his body was doing it on its own. Tears ran down his face. He wiped at them and looked scared. Klein grabbed my arm hard. "Move," he said. The blue glow pulsed once. The pressure surged. My vision threatened to skip again. I backed away so fast I almost fell. Cold air hit my lungs like water. Klein hauled Miller by the sleeve and shoved him between the rows. We ran. We didn't all make it out together. When the glow first pulsed, Miller stopped running. 1 second he was right behind us, coughing and laughing at the same time, and the next he jerked his head toward the field like he'd heard something clear through all that crackling noise. He turned back toward the rows. Klein shouted, "Miller, don't." Miller didn't look at him. His face was wet with tears. He raised his radio like he was answering a call. "I hear her," he said, and the way he said it made my chest go cold because it wasn't a joke. It was the most certain he'd sounded all night. "She needs me." I grabbed for his sleeve and missed. He slipped out of my hand like I was moving through water. He ran back into the corn, straight toward that faint blue pulse. I yelled his name and tried to follow. Klein tackled me around the waist and dragged me backward. "You go in there and you won't come back," he said through clenched teeth. You know it. I fought him for half a second, pure instinct, then the world skipped again and my feet landed wrong, and the fear hit me so hard it emptied everything else. Klein hauled me out, half carrying me, and we kept moving until the rows opened and the headlights of our cars cut the dark. We burst out onto the shoulder near our cars, panting. On the shoulder, Miller wasn't there. Klein and I spun our lights back toward the field, sweeping the edge rows, calling his name, listening for movement. All we heard was corn rustling in the wind and our own breathing. The radios were quiet now, like nothing had happened. Klein said, "He's not coming out." I couldn't accept that. I kept calling, louder until my throat hurt. I stepped toward the first row, and the hair on my arms lifted again, just from getting close. The pressure was still there at the edge, like a fence you couldn't see. Klein grabbed my vest and pulled me back. "Don't be stupid," he said. His voice shook, but he still sounded like he meant it. I called Ray from my phone because I didn't trust the radio. He picked up on the first ring, and I could hear the irritation in his voice until he heard mine. I told him fast what we'd found and what happened, and that Miller ran back in. Ray went quiet for a second. Then he said, "Stay right there. Do not go back in. I'm coming." When Ray arrived with 2 more units, he looked at Klein and me like he was taking inventory. "Where is he?" Ray asked. "Back in the rows," Klein said. He ran toward the lid. Ray's eyes narrowed. "Nobody goes near that seam alone," he said. "Not again." Then we went in as a group, lights and weapons and all the confidence we could fake. The tracks we'd made were still there, but they looked wrong, like they had been smeared. Miller's footprints ran toward the center point, and then they just stopped. No struggle marks, no drag, no ditch, just an end. The hatch sat flush in the dirt again, dark and cold like an ordinary piece of metal. No glow, no sound, no pressure that anyone but me seemed to notice anymore. Ray crouched and stared at the seam for a long time without touching it. Ray finally said, "We mark the spot and we pull out. Daylight search." I wanted to argue. I wanted to dig. I wanted to do something. But my head was still thick, and the idea of standing there until 3 a.m. turned into dawn made my stomach roll. At first light, we brought more people and walked the rows in a grid. We brought drones, dogs, anybody we could get. We found nothing. No Miller, no gear, no blood, not even a broken stalk. It was like he never existed past the point where he ran between those rows. Ray filed it as a missing officer, which sounds clean until you're the one who watched him run into something you can't describe. The state got notified. Search and rescue got notified. We did everything you're supposed to do. It didn't matter. By noon, people in unmarked vehicles were already asking questions we didn't have answers for. When I walked into the station, Ray was already on the phone. He looked up and his eyes locked on mine like he was checking if I was real. He said, "Tell me you didn't go back out there." I didn't lie. I did. His jaw tightened. "And you brought Miller." I did. Ray closed his eyes for a second. Then he said, "Is he gone?" I nodded. My mouth wouldn't work right, so I forced it. He ran back in. He didn't come out. Ray set the phone down so hard it clacked on the desk. "Jesus," he said, quiet, like he didn't want the word to travel. I started to explain again, but Ray cut me off. "Save it. We'll deal with that in a minute. Right now we've got a bigger problem." My phone started vibrating before he even finished the sentence. Dispatch was lighting up every line we had. Same address, same complaint over and over. People screaming, people laughing, people saying their family members were acting wrong. Ray snatched the radio and listened for 10 seconds before his face changed. "All units, respond," he said. "Now." Ray had already started rallying the department. We didn't have much. 9 officers on a good day, less on a bad one. People showed up fast because Ray's tone on the radio didn't sound like a routine call. We rolled back to the complex in 3 units and a couple personal vehicles from off-duty guys. The scene was worse than when I'd left. People were outside, scattered and wrong. An older woman grabbed my sleeve hard enough to hurt. "He's still in there," she said. "Please. He won't stop laughing." He looked at me like I was a stranger. I asked her where exactly, and she pointed toward the nearest stairwell with shaking fingers. "Second floor. The one with the plant by the door. You can't miss it." An older resident grabbed my sleeve and begged me to go get her husband, insisting he'd been in the closet laughing, insisting he'd hit her, insisting he wasn't like that. Blood ran from her nose, her hands shook. Ray ordered everybody away from the entrances. He used a loudspeaker and told residents to move to the far end of the lot. One of them muttered, "We can't just stand here." Ray snapped back, "You want to die in that doorway? Because that's what it'll do." Two officers tried to approach one entrance anyway, and I watched their bodies betray them. Their steps got heavy, their shoulders hunched. One stopped and vomited hard onto the concrete. They retreated pale and shaking. Ray made the call then. Nobody goes in. Not because we didn't want to help, but because whatever was inside that building hit you before you crossed the threshold. It turned your stomach and your head. It made you weak. We held that line for hours. People begged and cried and tried to rush the doors. Every now and then we heard laughter from inside, or screaming, or a low murmur like a crowd. The longer it went, the more my head ached, the more my vision threatened to flutter, like the pressure was trying to spread to us too. Near sunrise, the noises stopped. The building went quiet. The residents outside quieted too, like panic ran out and numb took over. When the sun rose, it showed us something that didn't make sense. Parts of the building looked wrong. Not broken, not burned, wrong. Some spots looked softened, like the shape had been pulled. One corner of the roofline seemed off. A few window frames looked stretched, like the building had tried to breathe and couldn't. Ray stared at it for a long time without speaking. Then the vehicles arrived. Black SUVs in a line moving with purpose, a larger truck behind them, another vehicle that looked like it belonged to a tactical team. They parked like they owned the place. Men got out with clean gear and calm faces, not local, not anyone I recognized. Some carried cases, some wore earpieces. They moved like they'd done this before. One of the men looked Ray up and down like he was deciding if Ray was a threat or a nuisance. Ray held his ground anyway, because that's what he does. Ray said, "This is my scene. Who are you?" The man answered like it was routine. "Federal. That's all you need." Ray said, "People are inside that building." The man nodded once. "We know." Ray asked, "Are you getting them out?" The man said, "Not the way you mean." One of them talked to Ray. I couldn't hear the words, but I watched Ray's face shift with every sentence, like he was being briefed on a world we weren't part of. Ray turned to us and said, "Everybody out. We're done here. They're taking over." People screamed and begged. One woman tried to run toward the building and got stopped. The men didn't react like cops. They reacted like technicians, like the people inside weren't people anymore, or like they were already written off. Later that day, Ray tried to take us back out to the field. Not because he believed in hatches and voices, but because he'd seen enough to know there was a source. We didn't get close. The county road was blocked with heavy barriers and men with rifles who looked like they were waiting for us, Ray argued. The man at the barrier didn't. He was polite in the way people are when they don't have to be. He told Ray we weren't allowed through. Ray said, "This is our county." Ray leaned forward and lowered his voice. "At least tell me if my officer is in that field." The man at the barrier didn't change expression. "You need to go home, sir," the man said. "Not today." That was the end of the conversation. The field might as well have been cut out of the map. Ray got a visit at the station the next day from two men who didn't show badges long enough for us to read. They asked for my statement. They asked for Klein's. They asked for the body cam footage from the field, even though our cameras hadn't captured what my eyes saw. One of them looked at me and said, "You didn't see anything unusual." I said, "My officer is missing." He didn't blink. "That's a separate matter." Ray tried to push back. "We need resources," the man said. "You will be provided what you need, and you will stop asking questions." Cole survived. After that, he went quiet. Lawyers got involved. His dad stopped answering calls. Everything turned into silence and process, like the incident was being wrapped up and filed away by hands we couldn't see. Klein refused to go back near the field for any amount of money. Ray stopped telling stories. He looked older and weak. My girlfriend didn't want to come back to the complex. She said the air still felt wrong. She said she kept hearing my voice call her name when I wasn't speaking. We moved out as fast as we could. It didn't feel like moving. It felt like retreating. I was told unofficially that I wasn't going back to that building. I was told the missing residents were being treated as lost. 11 names by the final count, 11 people who didn't come out, 11 people whose families were given nothing that sounded like truth. The black SUVs stayed around town for a few days, then they left. The fences stayed, the barriers stayed, people stopped talking about it in public. Out here, folks don't like attention, and they don't like questions they can't answer. It's easier to act like something never happened. But it happened. I don't know what's under that field. I don't know if it's a bunker, a machine, a door, or something that doesn't have a proper label. I don't know if it was built by people or found and buried and covered up with paperwork. I don't know why it can push voices through radios or why it can bend time so you lose minutes without moving. I don't know how it reached from a cornfield into a building across town like a sickness. I do know what it felt like standing near that seam. I know what I heard in my radio. I know what I saw when the blue glow leaked out like cold fire. I know what it did to people who weren't criminals, who weren't looking for trouble, who were just asleep in their own beds. I wanted a big case when I was younger. I wanted to matter. I wanted to be the guy who stepped in and fixed something broken. Now I've got a case nobody will explain, a stretch of road that doesn't belong to us anymore, a building full of people we couldn't save, and a metal circle under a field that moves on a schedule like it's alive. I'm writing this because I don't know what else to do. Maybe somebody out there has heard of something like this. Maybe you've seen a thing in the ground that shouldn't be there. Maybe you've heard your name in a voice that didn't belong to anyone on the line. Maybe you've lost time standing too close to something that felt charged, like the air was holding its breath. If you've got a theory, I'll read it. If you think I'm lying, that's fine. A week ago, I would have thought the same about anyone who posted something like this. But I was there. I watched a muddy farm pickup sit in the ditch with its door open like a warning. I watched a terrified kid try to do something desperate and get shot for it. I watched a hatch in a cornfield glow blue at 3 in the morning and pull at our minds like a current. I watched my neighbors turn into strangers in their own hallway. I watched a building look wrong under daylight, like reality had softened around it. The worst part is how normal some of the verbs still sound when I say them out loud. You find a vehicle parked wrong. You check welfare. You see something dangerous. You call it in. You stop a suspect from detonating a device. Those are normal sentences in my world. Those are things you can explain at a kitchen table. Then you add the parts that don't belong. A steel lid in a cornfield talks through a radio in the voice of somebody you love. A grown man runs toward it like it's the only thing that makes sense. You blink and lose minutes. A building full of families becomes a place you can't enter because your body quits on you before your brain does. And a convoy shows up and takes the whole thing away like they've owned it for years. By the next afternoon, we were being told what to say and what not to say. Hazardous materials. Ongoing investigation. Stay away from the area. They told us to keep our language neutral and stop speculating. They told us the residents would be contacted with updates. Nobody ever got real updates. Miller's family wanted answers. All I could give them was the clean version. Missing in the line of duty during a search. Active investigation. Resources deployed. I said the words I'm trained to say, and I hated myself for how empty they felt. I asked Ray once, quiet, if he thought there were more hatches. He stared at the wall for a long time and then said, "If there aren't, we're lucky." I didn't answer. He added, And we haven't been lucky. My girlfriend tried to hold it together, but she couldn't stay in that building. She said she still felt that heavy air in the hallway, even after the fences went up. She said she kept hearing my voice call her name when I wasn't speaking. One night, she finally looked at me and said, "I don't feel safe here anymore." So we left. Not a clean move. More like retreating with whatever we could carry. 2 men came to the station the next day. They didn't show badges long enough for me to read. They asked for my statement. They asked for Klein's. They asked for body cam footage from the field, even though our cameras didn't capture what my eyes saw. When I tried to talk about the voices, one of them cut me off. He said, "You didn't hear anything unusual." I told him, "My officer is missing." He said, "That's a separate matter." Ray asked where they were taking the investigation. The man answered, "You will be provided what you need and you will stop asking questions." After that, every road that mattered had a barrier. Every question got the same dead end. It had been exactly 3 nights since Miller disappeared. 2 nights ago, I woke up at 3:02 a.m. on the dot. No alarm, no reason. I just woke up like my body was listening to a clock I couldn't hear. The room felt heavy for a moment, like the air had more weight in it. My phone lit up with an incoming call from no number. I watched it ring until it stopped. I didn't answer. Then my radio crackled from across the room, even though it was off. A soft voice said, "Evan." 1 word, my name. Then silence. I sat there in the dark and realized something I didn't want to admit. Maybe they can block the road. Maybe they can fence the building. Maybe they can take over the scene and bury it in paperwork. That doesn't mean it's over. It just means it's quiet. So if you're reading this and you live somewhere like I do, flat land, fields, long empty roads, pay attention to the small things. Pay attention to a muddy farm pickup parked wrong with the door open. Pay attention to a radio that crackles when it shouldn't. Pay attention if you ever feel that charged air and that pressure like the world is holding its breath. And if you ever find a metal circle in the dirt where it doesn't belong, don't stand over it. Don't listen when it uses a voice you trust. Don't follow it, because once it calls you by name, it doesn't feel like a warning anymore. It feels like an invitation.